subjects were asked to be in a room monitoring a lie detector, and they were asking some questions to actors that
It
the
wasn't a
actors
lie
were in it.
detector.
It wasn't?
No, no. So they were asked a series of questions. Like imagine it like a multiple choice test. They were asked a list of simple questions, and the test subjects were the ones to be the proctors of this test. And when their job was to shock people at an ever increasing rate with certain intervals every time they got a question wrong. But it was all on a tape recording, and they were going up to 200, 300 volts before, which would kill a man, before they would end it, before they would end the experiment. And the scientist in the room could only say, the only thing they were allowed to say after the test, after like explaining how what they were supposed to do, was to say, you must continue the test. They were free to leave at any time. They didn't have to continue, but if they asked the person who was in the room with them, that's all they would say back to them. And what they found was that about 2/3 of the people would go through the test and would essentially kill a man after they were screaming about, like on the tape, the guy would like scream about heart pains and think he was dying and like pretend to throw up. There's a whole deal with it, and they would continue on simply because they felt they had to do so by an authority figure.
Well, I guess that again to answer the question it's tough because you have to know what the end goal is going to be, and that ties in with that, right? So let's switch the experiment around, and let's say that it was with real people, but shocking them would, I don't know, stop some aberrant behavior. It would depend on the behavior that you would want to stop. It would depend on the phenomena that you would want to stop. I don't think there's a way to clear cut say across the board you shouldn't inflict psychological harm in every situation. I think
No,
it's case by case.
yeah, I agree with you in a sense, but the only I don't know exactly why Vin brought that up, but the Milgram experiment was really to show how good people could do bad things because they are,
Social
sheep
pressure.
that they do what authority figures tell them to do.
Yeah.
The reason that I brought that one up is because people that were subject to that, the people who actually um, were the subjects, uh, came on afterwards to have actual trauma. And it was
Okay.
the reason behind many universities started having um, ethics boards.
Or was that the Stanford experiment?
Yeah, no, you're
The
mixing
prison
it up.
experiment.
No,
Am I mixing
no,
it up? Yeah.
Yeah.
no.
I didn't think it was down to them just being sheep. I thought that with the Milgram experiment, the idea was that they associated the guilt of the act with the authority, right? So they viewed the test,
No.
the experiment, the person doing the experiment in the room with them
Yeah,
as the authority, and therefore like guilty of like whatever befalls.
no, such a large conclusion was never made as
Uh,
to like the psychology behind it. It was really just decided that people would do, because what Milgram wanted to figure out, right? Because he was a Jew who'd been through the Holocaust, and he wanted to figure out why there would be so many like soldiers that would do such awful things, that would go on these, they would get them to drink a shit ton of booze and just, get in firing squads and just kill fucking thousands of people in a night. And it wanted to understand, like, try to understand why people would be able to do that, even though they're basically good people. And the Milgram experiment concluded that people are willing to do awful things because authority figures tell them to do so. Not necessarily that they like put off the guilt or any of that stuff.
Well, that's interesting because I actually, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the experiment, but I think it's more than that. So pointing, for example, to firing squads, if that was if the aim of the experiment was to explain a phenomena like that, I don't think that would cover it because you have to take multiple things into account, right? Like people in war, for example, see terrible fucking things, right? And I can only imagine the amount of rage and frustration and anger that a lot of the soldiers feel from seeing their friends die. So when you see men who would go out into firing squads, to kill fucking hundreds of people or whatever, I imagine that would be partly to play. Um, I just human behavior is much more nuanced than just people want to follow.
Well, these aren't
Those who
firing.
are
These aren't
superior.
firing squads of like POWs. That's not what I'm
Yeah, but
referring to.
even so though, I mean, that's irrelevant. Imagine, for example, you had been in a war, right? And you lost maybe a couple of your family members in World War II, and all your buddies have been killed. You walked on the battlefield. You stormed Normandy, the beach. You've seen men with their guts hanging out, screaming for their mommies, that sort of shit, right? And then you get what is sort of falsely a representation of what caused that, okay? And it's in the form of men in your POW camp. I could see how it might be easy, and I'm not saying it's justified, but how it might be easy to either kill those people or to act in a cruel way against those people. Well, I mean,
No, no,
we tend to make people representations of
Declan, that's not
experiences.
historically accurate.
Why?
Because so there are hundreds of letters of commanding officers who were forced to make, or who are making these commands, writing letters back to their own commanding officers saying, we need way more alcohol because our men just can't do this anymore.
No, I'm not saying that phenomenon doesn't exist. You're misunderstanding me. I'm not saying that phenomena doesn't exist. Of course, it's true that with some people, they just follow what superiors say because of the pressure of a person being over them, superior, in a superior way. That's a matter of a fact. What I'm saying is that I don't think that experiment fully flushes out why that happens in its entirety. I think in most cases, and in a lot of cases, there are many more variables in play than just that.
Like such as?
Those that I described, for example. Or I could describe one with me, right? The shit that I was describing with my family. Right? I didn't follow it because I felt that they were superior over me. Right? That's not why I followed it. I followed it, number one, because I was indoctrinated into it. But number two, also, there's a fear of embarrassment, right? A fear of not being in the in group. There's different social pressures.
Not wanting to be that guy.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, to give an example, okay?
No, I agree, but the Stanley Milgram experiment has no kind of social pressure in that sense.
That's why I say I don't think that experiment fully encompasses an explanation as to why people do that sort of thing.
It's part of getting rid of variables, right? Like you're trying to get rid of variables to try to pick apart where you only have one or two in a study, right?
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that I don't think
that seems to strengthen the study itself, not actually make it worse.
I didn't say that it was not strengthened or that it was at a deficit. What I said was I don't think it describes that phenomena in its totality. Now, I don't know what the aim of the experimenters were. If the aim of those who put the experiment together was to describe it in its totality, and I think my point stands. If not, then you have a point. If they're just looking at what effects superiority has on people's decision making in the light of a social suffering, and that's it, then yeah.
Yeah, that was the goal.
Okay, so if that was the goal, then yeah, but I don't think that it describes the experience in its totality. I think there are many more variables that come into play.
Sure, it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't cover everything in human.
Hold on, silent. Okay, both of you here. I looked up the Milgram experiment. It was done in the 60s, and it comes around the time when Adolf Eichmann, if I got the name correct, was going on trial for the Holocaust. They were looking to show or to try to understand were they just following orders or were they accomplice?
There you go.
Or were they basically the authority or the orders come down, do this, they did it. So did they do it because they were given orders to do it? Basically the instructor in the room telling you to keep going with the experiment, or were you doing it because you were being the accomplice to the experiment?
Right. There was some other variable. With
Why
the
were you
person
doing it?
themselves, in spite of the order, right?
Right.
There were about a third of the people rejected to continue along with the study after about halfway
Right,
through.
but 2/3 of them didn't.
Yeah, 2/3 of them didn't. That's true. But I think a really, if I remember correctly, I don't know what it was for the original study, but a really high number of people, like almost 100%, expressed like concern, but then continued on.
Yeah, but they still continued on.
No, I agree. I'm just stating that.
That's the point. Is they're just following orders. They have an issue with it, but they still did it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Was that not what I was saying? I thought I was making that point.
That's generally how society functions.
That was interesting.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Sorry if I stepped all over your conversation with Vin, Declan.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I think the one that might be a little bit more interesting as far as those studies is the Zombardo prison experiment, but that one they've never allowed to be repeated.
There was a movie about that, wasn't there?
Yeah, I don't know if it's any good or not.
Zombardo? You mean
Yeah.
Stanford?
Yeah, Zombardo was the last name
Oh.
of the guy who did it. Yeah.
Okay.
It is good. You're talking about the prison guard one, yeah?
The prison, yeah. The way the study worked was they split half of these young men into prisoners and half into prison guards to see if they would fully embrace their role. And like it was supposed to be 2 weeks long, and after like 6 days, they had to shut it down.
Yeah, I think there's a German film about it. And it's good.
Yeah.
It is.
Why
it is
did
good.
they shut it down?
Because people
Cola,
were getting
wait a
the
minute,
shit
hold on.
beat out of them and all sorts
Cola?
of awful stuff.
Okay.
How old are you, Cola?
Speak now, or you'll.
Oh, Cola's gone. Okay.
Yeah, but Keanu Reeves and some other guy. You look it up.
Gosh, it's gotten into me.
Keanu Reeves is so fucking awesome.
Didn't he do the Kitten movie? Like, didn't he do that movie with the kitten, or am I thinking about somebody else?
What the fuck are you talking about?
I forget what the name of the movie was,
Really
but Key and Peele did a movie where like they take down a drug lord for a kitten.
Are you talking about John Wick where they kill his dog? Oh no! Wait a second. You're talking about fuck.
Keanu.
No.
Yeah,
Wasn't-
that's why my brain is going there.
Yeah. That was the name
That-
of the kitten.
Yeah, no, that's where my brain went when I heard that.